Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am really excited to bring you a great guest today, Barry Goldstein, who is a phenomenal musician and has worked with a number of my favorite humans who are really making changes in the world. And for myself, I mean, you guys know me pretty well. Dr. Christine Smith, happy to bring you all of my wonderful colleagues to talk to. But in that, there's so many pieces of my story that have been influenced by things like music and dance and helping people to understand how to move energy through themselves. And I think music is such a huge piece of that. And Barry is a particularly interesting musician. And so I wanted to bring him on to talk about his experience with it. So hello, Barry. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here with you and your audience today, Christine.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask if you'd be open to just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, because I know it's been pretty interesting how you ended up working on this particular kind of music.
Yeah, my background is definitely interesting. So, like you would have told me 30 years ago that I would be doing this kind of music, I would definitely have laughed at you because it was not like how I set out to share music in the world. I was a music producer in New York City, a lot of hip hop, club music, coming up in New York with just a melting pot of music and different influences. And really, it was my own burnout within the music business that led me to creating music for relaxation, music for integration, music for energy work, all of that through working on myself. And so I was the experiment and wanted to get out of, you know, um, not being able to produce music in more of a flow state. And, my producing pop music was all about very specific, very minute areas of editing and literally spending 40 to 50 hours to create a 3-minute pop song. So that created the burnout. And, I fell in love with the music at a very young age. And my desire was to fall back in love with the kid who was experimenting, sitting on the edge of his bed, playing guitar and just writing songs. So I knew I wanted to get back to my heart. And at that time, there wasn't a ton of talk about heart coherence and brain coherence. But I did some research online, and what I found was that music has the ability to entrain with our hearts. So our heart at a relaxed state, most humans are between 60 to 70 beats per minute. I said, what would happen if I set my metronome to 60 beats per minute and totally reversed like my whole process instead of music, composing music? What would happen if I actually decomposed to music and composed myself with the music? And I was an experiment, I was like, okay, I'm just going to take hour-long journeys, let the music come through me and see what happens. I didn't think anyone would listen to ambient hour-long music with no melody, the opposite of pop music. And so I started to take these journeys, and I was moving into very meditative states in the process of composing that music, which we now know was entrainment. My heart was entraining to a coherent, steady beat, which was affecting my brainwave state, which now are calling neurocardiology, which was not, that term wasn't even around then. And what that is when your heart slows down and is in that coherent state, your brain starts producing more orderly rhythms that are conducive to what we know as the flow state. So that's the science behind what I was doing, although I didn't know it at the time. And I just started sharing it with people. And I was encouraged to utilize it in a lot of different scenarios in the medical world, helping people to go to sleep, helping people during chemo treatments, parents who had dementia or Alzheimer's, he was helping them to relax. So I really thought I was onto something with that. And that led to a lot of amazing collaborations. I'm kind of making a long story short, but collaborations with Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Daniel Amen, Dave Asprey wrote a book on this called The Secret Language of the Heart. And Dr. Joe wrote the foreword to that after we collaborated for many years of how my music was used at the advanced retreats to move people to these states of coherence, which they measured through brainwave technologies and through heart rate variability and a lot of other things. So that was really the start of it. In the midst of that, I also won a Grammy working with Les Paul for Best Rock Instrumental in 2005. So again, I've danced in a lot of different worlds.
I think that background is so beautiful. It is often that we find the most authentic things when we are doing it from a place of play, which it sounds like you're working on getting back to. And I can speak from experience about how my brain has literally become trained to enter different brainwave states just from your music alone, because I got to participate in listening to it while doing heavy meditations at Dr. Joe's workshops. And so now it's like my brain is trained to go into those states from the music.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
in addition to all of the pieces that you're talking about of heart coherence and matching the frequency of the heart. And I think I actually explained this in like a lab class that I teach, talking about the different parts of the body. I think people forget the heart is more of a frequency emitter and rhythmic tempo for the body over just being a pump. Like it's also a
Right,
pump,
that's right.
but your blood vessels do a lot of the pumping. It's not just the heart. The heart expands a larger magnetic field than any other components of the body, and that's shown by the Heart Math Institute, which I know you also collaborate with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this information is huge, and I think people don't realize how accessible it is, which is why I wanted to have you on to just talk about these things. And you mentioned something really interesting when you're describing that experience. You said, I wanted to decompose myself so that I could recompose myself with the music. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what that experience was like for you?
Sure, but remind me to come back to the aspect of the heart being a metronome in our body as well.
You got it.
So for me, the biggest aha moment was that I was able to move to a meditative state in the process of composing. And usually music is the ability to access both right and left brain. And we do, right? Because we have our technical expertise of, thinking about what we're playing at the same time, and we can connect to the other side and our creative side of our brain as well. But within this process, it was almost like I have to keep like one foot in this world and the ability to explore into connecting to something beyond myself. Because in that instance, and this gets into what I call the four body system. Most people look at health as just the physical body, but it's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so the spiritual aspect of this came in very strongly for me, was that my physical body, my mental thoughts, and my emotions really could not find a solution to the burnout. So, right, when I just allowed the music to come through me, it's almost like I created an invitation to collaborate with something beyond myself. And that was the big transition for me, stepping aside of what I knew and what would happen if I just let something move through me. And I didn't really have to call it anything. So I didn't get into like any religious beliefs, of what it was. Just, there's an intelligence beyond ourselves that we connect to. And many of, our modern scientists have connected to that and talked about it. Tesla talked about it. Albert Einstein utilized music to move into those states. When he had blocks, he would pick up a violin or a piano, and his son would hear him from the other room say, "Oh my God, I got it." Right. So, that's what flow state is, because we're moving out of our thoughts. We're able to come to have ideas and create and move into flow states. And tons of people, everyone from, Microsoft to Steve Jobs, a lot of the people who have created everything that we're using right now, to conduct this interview was created by someone who moved into flow state of some kind. And so that's really what I was, fascinated by, was moving into that flow state, and the fact that it wasn't a lot. In other words, I was trained to create melodies that people could remember. Now I was creating music that people should forget, right? Because when we're using music for sleep, for relaxation, you don't want to create a lot of the mind going into the analytical, saying, oh, I like that melody. That's my favorite part. That's great for pop music. But when you're trying to fall asleep at night and that bird comes in the same time every night, or that melody comes in the same time every night, now you know where you are. And you're like, oh man, it's 15 minutes in, I still can't get to sleep, right? So
So
that
true.
is that's the key. Like people think this type of music is easy to create, but it's really about being minimalistic and knowing where the sweet spots of space are, where people can just let go and surrender. And that's what I did in the composing process. And many years later, when I was writing my book, and also as I shared pieces of music that were creating a lot of impact in the world, like I have a piece of music called Hallelujah Amen that is used in all of the Dr. Joe retreats. And I had a specific intention for that piece of music, that it worked with people in the aspect of a prayer being answered before the result is in. So you start from the place that whatever it is you're asking for, it's already done. You're saying hallelujah, which is it's a celebration or a celebration or a glorification, and amen is it's already happened, right? It's happened. It's an agreement. So the healing or the prayer is answered before it starts. So I'm sharing this story for a reason. Like I didn't know that was my intention. And about a year later, I remember getting a call from Andrew and Lisa, who do the music for those events, and said, you know that song is being used in all of our coherence healings, which is when they step into a space of surrendering and working with 8 other people who are working with those individuals. Now, I didn't know that. And it wasn't, I never said use it in this way. So what I realized in that moment was, and you might already know this, music is a carrier of information. It's not only carrying melody and what you're hearing, but it's carrying intention, it's carrying the emotion of the composer, and it's creating obviously the specific frequencies that I'm combining with that were inspired by me in that moment. And when I'm composing it, I'm in that space. And so it's almost like there's a mic on the emotional, mental, spiritual aspects of the music that's picking up the subtle energies of the composer. And to even go beyond that, that piece of music becomes a field on its own of energy and information, because now whenever anyone hears that song and they've been to an event, like you said, you're already programmed, the science and the research shows that music creates autobiographical memories. So as soon as you hear that, you go into the zone, or you start moving into theta state automatically. That's how powerful music is. So really the shift is, for people listening out there, say, well, how do I use this, and how do I apply this in practical terms? It's utilizing music to target and navigate your energy. So it's music beyond entertainment. We've all had experiences where music has affected us in a powerful way. Just like when we've eat the right foods, we feel good, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to create change in our life unless we create a program for it. And that's really where the awareness gets a vibrational upgrade, is when you start saying, what piece of music can I use to start my day? What piece of music can I use before this important meeting? What piece of music can I use before I go visit my mom in the hospital? That's when we realize that music is what I call an acoustoceutical, right? It's not just, it's music as medicine. And that's where I think the intersection of what some people might consider woo, and also people who are, within the medical practices, that I speak at CME lectures and have to provide research for all of this. There's a bridge that's going on in the world now where people are starting to awaken to the power of sound on both aspects, science and spirituality, and ancient and modern meeting. And it's exciting.
Super exciting. And I think the way that you're doing it by blending two worlds of classic instruments, like I love all the strings and piano and things that you use alongside the electronic component, which allows you to kind of create some of that very interesting
Hmm.
spaciousness that's new and novel for the mind and that it likes to get to listen to, but without those points of knowing and being able to keep track of time that you're talking about. I think those things are huge. And we've been using music in our spiritual ceremonies for thousands and thousands of years. It's not something that is new, but it is something that people are waking back up to, as you mentioned. And I think it's a big deal and it's something that's needed. I think people are looking for options, ways to not only work with their body naturally, but to get in touch with themselves. And this type of music, the way that you approach it, it creates those brainwave states that people can. And I was having an interesting conversation with someone the other day, and we're talking about the brainwave states and the order that they go in, right? You have beta, and then you kind
Hmm.
of go into alpha. And then we were discussing, we're like, why are they out of order? Do you think humans are actually supposed to live in the alpha state? And then beta is an alert state. And so it's just like an interesting conversation of like, maybe we are meant to spend more time in the alpha state. That's really more of our natural state. And that's the type of creation that your music brings forth. So I would love, like, as we're kind of talking about brainwave states and diving a little bit deeper into the heart coherence, to wrap back around to that comment around the heart as a metronome, and just to get your opinion on that with all the study you've been doing around heart coherence, and maybe even explaining a little bit of what that means for people who aren't as familiar with it.
Sure. So yeah, for me, well, heart coherence is really based around moving our heart to those smooth and orderly rhythms. And so when that occurs, if you think of the heart as the metronome, right, that sets the time for our bodies of what's going on in our bodies. So the best way for me to explain it is if you thought about all the individual parts of our body as parts of an orchestra. And right, they all decided, all the different systems and the parts of our body decided they wanted to play whatever tempo and whatever music that they wanted to play. Nothing was regulating them. What would that sound like? And it would be fairly incoherent and probably dissonant. Right? But if there's an agreed upon tempo for all of that to kind of come into synchronization with, the heart is the metronome that sends out that tempo to the other systems in our body. And we have the ability to entrain to those tempos. Our respiratory rate slows down and we start breathing differently. And we move into what you're very familiar with called the parasympathetic state, which is the state where we're more conducive to rest and digest, where our immune system can be regulated and improved, our heart rate variability, which is the measurement of how we deal with particular challenges and stresses in our life, and the resilience that we have with them can also be increased during that. Our sleeping can be better. Just a host of benefits happen when we're in the parasympathetic state. And that happens when we're in the slower brainwave states. Most, of the time when we're in sympathetic, which is the opposite of that, when we're kind of having to run from the bear, or we have timelines and deadlines and things to do, we're in sympathetic state, and we're also in the higher beta brainwave states. So I don't personally think they're out of order, because I think it's based on like what we want to accomplish.
Well, it was just like an interesting conversation that we were having. But yes, I agree with you that it's based on, they all have their role and their purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the intersection, of what we're talking about, which, as you said, these things are not new. I call, music and the way we're talking about it is like the oldest biohack that we have. I mean, nothing is older musically than the drum outside of utilizing the voice for communication. Drums were the first thing that were utilized in terms of instruments, and that was a way for us to communicate. And thousands of years later, they're finding that participating in what so many people would consider probably one of the, like the wooest things to do outside of like oming, which I'll talk about in a second also, is to be in a drum circle with someone, right? Yet they're showing through a lot of different studies the ability for us to move into alpha brainwave states, those states where we're slowing down and moving into more of the ability to regulate that parasympathetic system, is when we're just really connecting with a simple and slow rhythm. Again, this sounds familiar, right? With a drum, because literally it's part of our natural being to want to synchronize with the drums. And that's why they're so ancient. And they're showing literally that vets with PTSD have like double their alpha brainwaves in one session and able to like move into much less anxiety. That, you know, they're able to increase anti-inflammatory markers and improve immune systems just through drumming. And as well as all the social implications of feeling like you're part of community, the effect of that on our well-being. So again, it's not spirituality is catching up to science, it's science is catching up to spirituality. And that we're taking the interest in doing the research. 30 years ago, the only one who did research, I won't say the only, I shouldn't say only, but the majority of research that we saw was based on the pharmaceutical industry, right? So if there's not a way to make money on research, it's very expensive to do research just for the sake of providing, what the benefits are if you're not literally selling anything.
I completely agree with that. I've worked in research in multiple areas, and there was a reason I left research. It's very challenging to do. I have a lot of respect for what you guys are doing as a team of actually capturing the data around this to really help people wake up and realize, like, we have kind of gone away from our core. And I think this stuff brings us back to our true essence as humans. And like you were talking about the experience in an orchestra. And like I used to play an orchestra, and there's something about it where you just have an entire community vibrating through your whole body. And it's very hard to explain, but there's just nothing else that can really replace it. And it's very different being in the orchestra versus listening to it, because you're like physically feeling it when you're in it. And then you had talked about drum circles, and I participated in those too. And they can get you into complete trance states completely sober, and just with drumming, just with the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start to think about this frequency and music carrying information, and what you're talking about with you even being in the state when you're creating it, we start to realize that it's actually this thing that can connect us all, because it's a shared experience, it's a shared frequency, a shared rhythm, and we are all made of frequency anyway when you really dive down the quantum physics hole. And in those drum circles, they have their own medicine. In more cultural settings where they do things like icaros, which is what they would do with psychedelic therapies, which are icaros are like the chants that natives sing when you're going through that, and they create this experience out of it. That's its own experience. Whereas your music is definitely its own experience as well. And like it's really fun. We met at the lunch table at a conference talking about consciousness and frequency and quantum physics, which are my favorite kinds of conversations to have. And I think about when you are in this state, when you're creating it, you are imbuing it with that energy and that frequency. And then that gets played for people who are participating in coherence healings, and it moves through them and donates that state that you've practiced so much, donates that state to their body for someone who maybe is less practiced at it. So the music is really this tool to help introduce people to what a different brainwave state might be like, so that they can implement it more in their lives. And that, I think, is huge, along with the community aspect of all of it. Like we've all had that experience at a concert where everyone is on the same rhythm and you're all having that shared experience. Like that is the beauty and the tools of music that I think can be quite amazing. So with all this means that we can really like biohack our brain with music alone. With the type of work that you've been doing, like what do you see as the most exciting piece of that, this ability to biohack our brain with music?
Yeah, so I talked about drumming, but one of the other aspects, and there are a lot of different ones. There's working with binaural beats and brainwave entrainment that to target the brainwave states as well. And I could talk a little bit about that, which is where we're introducing a specific frequency to each side of left and right ears. And so, for instance, if we were targeting the alpha brainwave state at say 8 hertz, we might introduce 100 hertz in one side and 108 in the other. And the difference between the two, the brain can entrain to its frequency following response. And has the ability to then put that into music because music makes it palpable. Like no one wants to just hear two tones in there. Some people do, but music makes it more palatable because it creates the safety to take the journey with it. And that's really what it's about, is providing the soundtrack for people to explore. And I think that's really where we are in consciousness now. It shouldn't be dogmatic, well, this is what you have to do to get to here. But if you can provide like this conversation where we're showing the science behind it, and people are like, maybe I'd like to just try that. And in a moment, within a 15-minute piece of music or a meditation, they just lose track of time. They lose track of their thoughts. And they're like, oh my God, I think I just meditated, right? That is the sweet spot of where we want to be right now, to allow people to have an experience and to ask more questions and to realize the potential of that one moment that could ripple out into their lives. Imagine if we can get out of our thinking mind, right, for 10 minutes in our day, even how you could rejuvenate between patients, right? How you can be ready to write your book at night, or wake up in the morning in, in a new energy from the day before, if it was one of those days. And so, that's where it gets really powerful. And that's where, part of the challenge is where in many aspects, we're moving away from that, and especially like in the biohacking world, we're looking for technology, we're looking for things to fix, fix us. And there's some amazing technologies, and I'm believe me, I love technology just as much as anyone else, but also starting from the point that we are the technology, that we have the aspect within ourselves to do these things without external sources, or the physical technology, the technology of moving out of our inner thoughts and that dialogue that we call the monkey mind that we can't get out of when we start telling ourselves things over and over again. Why do you think that mantra and chant was created? Because when we're doing a repetitive chant, it's hard to be within our ego and our own thoughts, because this repetitive chant gives us another focal point. And even in the simple chanting of something like Om, which again, like if you would have told me like 30 years ago, hey, you're going to be telling people that chant to Om, this was the guy in the park who was like listening to Stevie Wonder and like the beginning of hip hop, Rapper Delight, Sly and the Family Stone, all this music. I would have definitely been the guy making fun of me. But now they're showing studies that the correlation of neurohemodynamic correlation of chanting Om, and how that creates limbic deactivation in the brain. So to translate, that basically talks about how we can increase our blood flow by chanting, and how when we do, that creates and activates specific areas of our brain that are associated with inner peace. And they showed this through fMRI studies, that when we chanted the word S as the as the challenge group, nothing happened within the fMRIs that showed that it had any benefit or lit up in any areas of the brain that would be beneficial. But when we chanted Om, several different areas that were associated with inner peace, also with the regulation of dopamine, a lot of different things that are going on in our body just by chanting Om. So when you talk about biohacking, like, yeah, you can go out and spend, thousands of dollars on, those headbands that regulate your brainwave states, and some people love them, or you can chant Om, and for free, right? And practice. No one's going to be there. There's lots of videos on, not a big how-to. There is some aspects of it and what you're connecting to. But, I showed this study, Christine, in a CME lecture for best answer for cancer, right? This was at a cancer summit live, and I had 200 doctors standing up to chant chant I created called Om Shalom Home. So, you know, it's a language
Good job.
to that's, to communicate the science of it so people can have an experience of their own.
I think that's huge. And to have a room full of doctors breaking out of their rut of training and understanding these things as options, I think is the evolution of healthcare for sure. And then when we even talk about like the origins of Om, right? That's a Sanskrit word. And really it uses all the letters that represent the sounds of the universe. If you go into like old
Right.
yogi Sanskrit type history. And when we're doing that, we start to communicate with the universe in frequency rather than thought. And I tell my clients all the time when it comes to meditation, working with their bodies, like the body takes instructions and feelings and in images. It's not as great with words. And so if we can imagine certain things and bring a certain feeling in, that is going to change our cellular biology more than anything else. Then they've also shown that, you know, very difficult emotional states can do more damage to a cell than a chemical exposure. So if we can start to regulate these things, that is one of the most powerful tools that we have. And these tools are so accessible to people. This is stuff that they can do on a daily basis at home. I was listening to your stuff earlier today just to kind of think back to how much of your music I heard without realizing I was listening to your music, and just kind of going back and reconnecting with it in a really beautiful way. And for anybody listening, I think we're going to do a little demo towards the end, and I'm excited for that, for you guys to get to hear it, because this is the idea of acousticeuticals that he was talking about, which is basically, think of it as a health oriented supplement for yourself, but in the form of an audio file. And this is something you can listen to walking or running and create a meditative state for yourself. You can listen to it in meditation sitting still. You can listen to it in the car with your kids if you're having a super frazzled day, right? Like I try to talk to my clients, and I think about, I work with a lot of public service workers, and you had mentioned veterans, and I think about police officers and firefighters. And one of the biggest things I get from that population is I need something that will allow me to go from work mode and enable me to go home to my family in family mode. And so we
Right.
talk about things that they can do in the driveway before they go in. And this is some of the stuff that I tell them about. I'm like, well, there's these pieces of music you can listen to, there's these meditations that you can listen to, all of these kinds of things. So how do you like to tell people to implement it into their daily life?
Yeah. So for me, I like to introduce this in several different ways. I think the one of the most powerful ways to introduce utilizing music and sound and vibration is comes from the premise that music isn't just something that's happening to you, it's something that's happening in you. And we've moved away from even being able to place our hands on our heart. Like we used to have the Pledge Allegiance of the flag, when we went into school in the mornings, and we'd all start our day feeling our heartbeat. So I start my day by closing my eyes and placing my hands on my heart and just breathing in through my heart and out through my heart. But even before I do that, I start from the premise that I'm touching something very sacred. Like if someone allowed me to place my hand on their heart, that would be a really, that would be a very powerful thing and a very intimate thing, and very allowing someone to be that vulnerable that you would place your hand on their heart. Imagine if you created that awareness with yourself, like you're just about to touch something so sacred that this is your body's life force that you're connecting to like every day. And when you realize that you have your own unique heartbeat, like we all are connected through our heartbeats. We all have a heartbeat. We all have a breath. It's a common, common thing that we have all have in common. But yours is unique to you. You have what I call your heart code. So when you place your hands on your heart, it's like coming home. And when you can use this and breathing techniques, I have some of them in my book as well. I have one called the Heart Song Breathing Process, where you're breathing from through the earth into your heart, through the heavens into your heart, and then in through the heart and out through the heart. You can literally, it's almost like taking a vibrational shower Like really imagine having a patient that's, a challenging, that, they're going through something very traumatic in their life or a chronic illness. And you have to be fully present there for them as their caretaker. But ultimately, for you to be the best doctor you can be, you have to take care of yourself, right? So that you can be the best for them. So literally taking 5 minutes in between patients and just closing your eyes and saying, I just need to feel my own energy, that you are a source for energy, and sending this out to your physical body, So when you place your hands on your heart, like, why do we do that? Like, what's the why behind it? And it's ultimately to create a sense of gratitude. Like, no matter what's going on in my life and what's going on in my day, before it snowballs into one of those days, that, wow, I'm pretty lucky. My heart's beating, my breath is here, my life force is moving through me, and I have music going through my body. My heartbeat and my breath are like this orchestra, as we talked about. The heart's that metronome that's sending out the music in your body and to your body. So when you can start with that appreciation, because you're listening at a very subtle level, you might not even hear it with your ears, but you feel it vibrationally. Imagine how that's going to amplify the process of that, and then listening to a piece of music that is going to open your heart. And that's really, the two aspects of heart coherence. Is one is connecting with those emotions, that like gratitude, kindness, compassion, but the music allows us to get there even faster because we can target listening to it, at that specific tempo as well. So it's kind of like the magic ingredient within moving to heart coherence that not everyone is talking about, is music really amplifies the process. So that's how I start in implementing my day. I like to use that sporadically throughout my day. But if I had to like give your listeners a really practical way to use it, in addition to that, I would say think of it as nourishment, like musical nourishment. Just like you nourish yourself with 3 meals during your day, think of those 3 times to start using music. Like you're breaking the fast of not eating in the morning because you haven't put any food into your body. So what's the first piece of music that you want to hear to break the fast of not hearing? And then start your day with that. And look at your schedule. Like we schedule everything out. Like maybe you don't want to start with a relaxing piece of music. Maybe you want to tap into gratitude by listening to Dido's song, Thank You, or Louis Armstrong, What a Wonderful World. That's where, the power of preferred music, which is also being studied as well, comes in, showing your preferred music is what's going to create that transformation for you as well. And then, schedule it in your day how you need it. And then for lunch, think of lunch the same way as you would, well, why do you eat lunch? It's to recharge and regenerate your energy in the middle of your day because you haven't nourished yourself in a few hours. So same thing musically, like what is going to recharge you? If you had a really stressful morning, maybe you want to dance it off. And again, a lot of studies around dancing, increasing cognition, and movement and exercise, increasing cognition, and music, with your preferred music doing that. You're also regulating things in your body like dopamine that are going to allow you to move into more creative states. You're curtailing cortisol levels, which are stress hormones. And so that's a great way to recharge yourself in the middle of your day, is to listen to a piece of music, get up and move to it. Or I do what I call a 5-minute vacation, which is listening to a piece of music from another part of the world. So if you're like in the same environment and you want to get out of that, close your eyes, listen to a piece of music from Jamaica, listen to a piece of music, from the Orient, whatever it is. And if you tap into a multi-sensory experience with that, you'll find that it literally can shift your environment. And then at night, I say an hour, and this is like, I would say probably one of the most important things, because like all of these things are precursors to chronic illness. When we're talking about biohacking, anxiety, mood, and sleep, are all precursors to chronic illnesses. If you're not looking at those things in your life. So sleep is a big one. I mean, literally 75 million people in our country alone have some type of insomnia. And it's getting worse because we're stimulating ourselves more and more through social media, through, different technologies before we go to bed at night, and then we're moving from these high beta brainwave states and we're not bridging it. We're not taking time to wind down. So we're so tired. We're moving like from beta very quickly through alpha, and theta and into delta. And a lot of people just, get to sleep. They don't have a problem getting to sleep, but then they wake up because they haven't processed their day and they haven't moved into some type of ritual. And that's the thing we're missing, like thousands of years ago. Virtually every ancient civilization knew that sleep was a sacred state. Like this is where we go to recharge our physical body. And when we go into dream state to meet with loved ones who have passed, who meet with ancestors, that was the belief system. When we're going into dream state, we're also getting guidance and messages that can be useful in our regular day-to-day life. So just, recreating ritual around music and starting to wind down like an hour before you go to sleep at night. Pick a piece of music at about 60 beats per minute. You can even Google it, or you can go, to my Spotify, channel. I have playlists for sleep and winding down and all those, and
Amazing.
they're already done. All you have to do is, put them on, and you start to reprogram your circadian rhythms as well, and moving back into sync with what your body needs at night. Your body doesn't need more beta brainwaves at night, and so when you wind down that way, it's very Pavlovian. It's probably taken a long time for you to get to a place where you've moved into sleep habits that are not conducive to, supporting you in whatever you're doing. And so do it for a 30-day period and you'll start to find exactly like you said, Christine. Then when you put that music on, it's like your body's saying, oh, okay, to, it's time to go into sleep. And ultimately, you know, yeah, it's about biohacking. We're looking for ways to do this stuff, and it's about longevity. But for me, it's about purpose. Like what good is living an extra 30 years if you're just going to be a miserable person for another 30 years, right? I mean, it's about tapping into what your mission is and what do you want to leave behind that can be beneficial for people, legacy, whether it's for your grandchildren and just them loving the way you were with them, or whether it's creating your next book or your next music piece. It doesn't matter what it is, but you want to have enough energy to do that. And if you're spending it every place else and not aware of how you budget your energy, then you're not going to have a whole lot left for your mission and to move into flow states. As we're talking about, all of these are conducive to moving into flow states. And so if you are doing it and you're getting in this meditative state, take it an extra step and connect for another 10 to 15 minutes and allow whatever's going to come through, come through. Like I have ideas when I wake up in the morning and listen to music. Like yesterday, I had an idea for a whole new course. It came through in 5 minutes, like literally the whole course, because I stayed in that state. I didn't jump out of my bed and check my email. I realized I'm coming out of Delta. I'm
Mhm.
going into theta and alpha. Wow, this is the perfect state to just stay in bed for an extra 10 minutes before I start my day. And it's awareness. Create a program.
I love your statement of there's no point in like biohacking yourself to longer living if you're miserable the whole time. And all I could think about as you were talking about this was two things. And one of them you kind of just went over when you're like, I created space for my brain to come up with this course and like create this download because there was space. That's one of the things I particularly love about your music. Like I love traditional music and pop and other things that we would listen to and all the classics, but I really like music that creates spaciousness in my head, which doesn't always involve lyrics. A lot of the time it's instrumentals, and it's not always instrumentals with like a lot going on. It's instrumentals that give space, which I think is what you've been talking about. And when you're talking about like putting your hand on your heart or just getting in touch with your own energy at the beginning of the day or during lunch or between meetings, I think if we're talking about the heart as this metronome, it's like a conductor, right? It's conducting the symphony of your body. And if you have six different voices talking to the conductor, it's not going to do a very good job. So if we can take a second to kind of get in tune with one voice, then the conductor can sink into that flow state and it can do its work, which is our physiology and our body and balancing our cortisol. And when we take that moment to just balance our cortisol a little teeny bit in the morning, it's almost like it creates this protective biochemical shield for us the rest of the day. It's like if we can balance at the beginning of the day, then we're much more resilient for the rest of the day versus if you start off on a weird tempo, you're going to be thrown off track by the smallest things. So I think it actually creates a lot more resiliency to tune into yourself and tune into that conductor like that. And I want to make sure to honor your time and everything. So if you're still open to doing a sound demo, I think that would be fantastic for people. And we could kind of, let things end with that. So we end on like this beautiful, nice, spacious note. But I want to make sure that if people wanted to find you or find your music or collaborate with you in any way, where would you direct them to?
Yeah, so my main website is barrygoldsteinmusic.com. And from there, that's a hub that gets you to a lot of my other things, my courses, my music, and everything else. But you can, literally find me anywhere where music's being distributed: Spotify, Amazon, iTunes. Just look up Barry Goldstein. I also have a YouTube channel that has a lot of music for free, as well as some of my teachings and processes as well. So I'm easy to find. And if any of this interests you, I offer a lot of great courses on taking this into next steps, because it is really a conversation and it's unique. It's almost like another language. And when you start really working with your heart space, it's one of the biggest benefits of that is it increases your intuition and also your gut feelings. So you're much more aware of how things feel for you. And, we tap into these things, of course, but intuition on a daily basis, but do we always listen? So it's a two-way conversation that creates this space for really, I think it's important in how we're moving forward in society now, is tapping back into that heart that is really needed, that we need to go beyond looking at things on paper, what looks good, and really ask our heart, wow, does this feel right for me? Because there's so much energy out there. There's so much, there's so many opportunities. But really, I found when I listen to my heart, it never lies. So with that, I would say when I'm going to turn around and play a piece of music, I don't know what exactly I'm going to play. So I'm going to just, move into that space of connecting and slowing myself down. But I would say take the opportunity to, if it feels okay for you, and close your eyes and place your hands on your heart, or at least start out that way, and set an intention for yourself for whenever it is you're listening to this, of what you need this music for right now in your life. What would be the prescription that you'd be writing for yourself right now, if you could feel like a musical prescription? And I'll tap into the energy, and it might take me a minute to turn around and start and get my settings right here. And
Sounds great.
I'll just kind of go into it. So when you hear the music, just allow yourself to close your eyes and go inward.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You have an amazing ability to create heart space.
I was able to move from definitely from beta and conversation, and it that's the great thing when it becomes your process. Like it's my process as well of moving to those states and regulating myself with it. So
I know the feeling. I definitely get better client results when I am in my own alpha state working on them.
yeah, yeah, and that's I think more and more people in the medical profession like yourself, need to be having these conversations. And I really commend you for, to for doing that as well, because it's not always the first thing on people's mind. Yeah, let me prescribe some music for you in terms of, finding something that's going to assist somebody. So, and not to take away from how medicine is used. Like I don't ever want anyone to just stop, using their medicine in
Just
place of
another tool.
anything. Yeah, but just as another tool that's low cost, non-invasive, and literally that each one of us has the ability to become the DJ of our own lives and program our lives the way we want with music. So it's just like I said at the beginning, it was about falling back in love with music, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that in closing, that's really where it becomes more powerful when you fall back in love with music. It's almost like a long lost friend. Oh yeah, well, I used to like talk to them, like all the time, and even when I call them up like 10 years later, it's like we never stopped speaking. And it's the same thing with a lot of our music, that we can just go back into our playlists and our inventories of things that we loved. And it's like finding and hanging out with an old friend.
I also think about the idea that we are frequency, music is frequency. So really it's just choosing what you would like to entrain your energy to. So it's such a good regulator and tool and playful experiment that you can do on a regular daily basis. So thank you so much for the demo and for taking the time to talk about this. I love recording these because I share them with everything from clients to fellow colleagues to other doctors training outside of our traditional paradigm,
Mhm,
and to
mhm.
those training in it. So I look forward to being able to share this as a resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Greatly appreciate it. And it was so great to meet you.
Absolutely, you too. And for anyone listening, if you like this stuff and you want to hear more or you have questions, like feel free to comment and ask us questions, and we'll
Mhm.
get back to you and help you find whatever resources you're looking for. And please feel free to follow us on social media. It's the best way that you can help spread this stuff and help small businesses. So thank you so much, Barry, and I look forward to the next time.
All right. Thank you.